Hey everybody, it's the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer series here on clanofthegreywolf.com. Another awesome week of comments this week, guys. Really impressed by the way that the community consistently steps up at this point. Love to say that we're taking off, but we've been going strong for a long time. So, love to see the comments escalate. It's almost a shame for me at some point, at least it has been for the last couple weeks, to actually decide a moment to get the video recorded and go, because I'm always interested to see what kind of new comments are coming. So whenever we have a week like that, I know we're on the right track. We're definitely asking the right kinds of questions, and we're definitely stimulating the right conversations from the community, and that means we are doing our job. So as always, much appreciated from the community. Now, one thing before I jump into this week's Weekly Wringer that I think warrants mention. Several of you made some comments in the comments section, obviously, but also sent me private messages. I got a lot more than I think I usually do this week, and I always try my hardest to answer anytime you guys send me any kind of communication. This isn't, as you know, Rue or my's a regular job, and we do have day jobs, and we try to kind of work all this around it, if you will, and we try to respond as much as we can. But if you guys send me anything, I try to get back as much as I can. I got a lot of private messages this week on the website about the question from last week, which was about the best animated series, and took a little bit of heat. Some of you had a little bit of a bone to pick with me, which I love. Again, if you guys feel like there's some feedback you want to give me, and many of you sent me some messages. We ended up having some good conversations. We ended up working it all out. I think it's great. But some of you, I think, were particularly miffed about the fact that last week I asked about the best animated series of all time, and my list didn't include any anime series, and to be honest, with the exception of Speed Racer getting mentioned, I didn't really mention a lot of anime stuff at all. As a matter of fact, I talked very little about anime at all. And so, several of you thought that this might stem from some kind of cultural insensitivity, or the fact that I didn't ask the question the right way. And I think, first of all, I disagree completely with the former. I think those of you that have been watching the Weekly Wringer for more than a week know that this is not a culturally insensitive show. We're here to talk about games. We're here to talk about technology. We're here to talk about things that geeks really love to talk about. And there's no room for hate in any of that. I think all of you that know me know that I'm not about that at all. But I would agree with the latter, and that is that sometimes, we do this on the Weekly Wringer with some great consistency, right? Sometimes I ask you guys a question that has a very definitive answer. But most of the time, I ask a question that doesn't have a lot of rules assigned to it. The criteria are kind of just up here in my mind. I know them pretty well, but I don't necessarily, broadcast them out to you guys as to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. I do that on purpose. I want to see where the community is going to take the question. Now, with almost no exception out there, I always kind of meander and follow wherever the community goes. Last week I tended to do that, but only, again, for the majority of folks. I didn't kind of go down the path of anime where many of you went to talk about some of those things. And some of you felt like that meant that I was ignoring you, or that I didn't read your comments, or that you thought I was just basically shielding you from, shielding my comments from yours, basically. And nothing can be further from the truth. First of all, though, I do want to apologize. I don't ever want any segment of my audience to think that I'm ignoring them, because I don't ignore you guys at all. Again, those of you that have watched the Weekly Wringer for more than 1 week know that I have the utmost respect for you guys and your comments. I try to make sure that everyone's comments gets voice. And at the end of the day, I kind of bring voice to the ones that I think are really bringing out the points that drive the conversation. That being said, I also defend my choices, and I sorted this out with many of you folks during messages during the course of the week. We actually had plenty of opportunity to kind of hash through the criteria I was generally thinking about when I was talking about Best Animated Series, and more importantly, what I wasn't thinking about for criteria Best Animated Series. And like I say, we fleshed it out. I think we sorted the problems out, and I don't think there was a whole lot of disagreement when it really came down to it. You know, animation style, all these other kinds of things that I think a lot of you are putting a ton of weight on, which by the way, I would 100% back some anime series for some of those criteria that I wasn't considering. That wasn't in my mind, and I think it was a little bit hazy for you guys. So I apologize for that. But the Weekly Ringer always presses on. I think it really does open the door for us to talk. You know, it's an opportunity, right, to talk about some really interesting things that you guys have brought to my attention, and several of you have offered up some of the best examples of anime that you have to offer that you think I would enjoy, and I'm very open to that. As long as it fits within the realm and spectrum of things that I enjoy and can get into, you bet I will dive in. That doesn't just go for anime, guys. It goes for anything that you really particularly enjoy. I am willing to entertain those kinds of things as well, as much as I'm willing to entertain perspective questions for the Weekly Ringer. If you've got something that you like in some kind of major way, I will always find a way to ask a question about it, or at least dive into it to see what kind of things come out of it. I could talk about last week forever, but I'm not going to. I just wanted to make that mention of it for those of you that felt somehow offended. You know that the Commodore has nothing but love for the community. Now let's get to this week, which I want to start by welcoming some of our new members, as I always do. We had some really great comments from our new folks, which I always love to see. Not nearly as many people as last week, but the sheer number of comments I think made up for that fact as well. So here we go. New to the community this week, we've got Arduous Eternity. Now, how is that for a deep name? Welcome to you, Arduous Eternity. Whenever I think of that, I just have this image of just like doing work for a long time. Anyway, maybe you're stuck in an arduous eternity, and for that I feel sorry for you. 8-Bit Brian. Welcome to you, 8-Bit Brian. Awesome name. I think that's really cool. It should be the, 8-Bit Commodore. I don't know. Grateful Dead. Welcome to you. Perhaps a fan. I don't know. Not, perhaps someone that has several bootleg recordings of some Grateful Dead shows. Maybe you want to get a Weekly Ringer asked about the Grateful Dead. I myself am not the biggest fan, but, we love the Grateful Dead, and come on in for a Grateful Dead. Welcome to the community. Furious George, and I thought Furious George was an awesome concept. I think that's just an awesome name, Furious George. And then I saw the icon, and I just went, wow, that is just classic. Laughed out loud at that one, so if you were looking to make the Commodore laugh this week, you certainly succeeded. Furious George. Great comment too, by the way. All of you had some great comments. And then we've got, now this one I'm going to have to take a reach on, guys. Now, for those of you that also know, I don't do a lot of great pronunciation sometimes, and I often mess up people's names, as I did with even some last week. But this week we have Demue, I think is how you say that. Demue, I think it's how you say that. Welcome to you as well. Welcome to all of you to the community. It's great to have all of you as a part of the Weekly Ringer, and I hope to see many comments from you continuing on into the future, which is what keeps the series going and keeps me doing things while the NCAA tournament is going on, and I should be watching basketball. All kidding aside, last week we talked about, last week I asked a question that asked about kind of a new entrant. There were the rumors of the Steam box, which turned out to be false, which is cool. A lot of times in the Weekly Ringer, I get to, because it's very topical, I get to talk about things that are only in the news cycle for a week. That's cool. But there was the rumor that Valve or anyone, the question really didn't matter, didn't specify who. Were you ready to really introduce a new console to the fray, as it were? To see what the big three, were doing by challenging them with a new entrant. And a lot of interesting positions. I felt like there were a lot of overall kind of overarching positions that manifested themselves many, many times throughout the commentary. And I have to say I agree with almost everything you guys had put out there. And as such, I've got a lot of comments to run through here. And I thought generally people were willing to say this, and that is they'd be willing to accept a new entrant, and that the market could probably even stand to have another entrant if certain conditions were met. And I won't get into all of them because some of you have them in the comments I'm going to speak about. But I think the biggest overarching condition is that there could be a new entrant if the quality and the overall experience was somehow altered, changed, innovated by this system. And in that case, I think I couldn't agree more. But before I get into my opinion, let's get into the nitty-gritty of all of yours. Lord of Nothing talked about the idea of the Great Recession really hurting gamers' wallets. I think this is by and large true. The video game industry has seen a little bit of stagnation recently. And I don't just mean in terms of building wonderful, innovative games. I think there's been a lot of that. I think in many ways the video game industry is more innovative now than it ever has been. In many ways, not always, but it is a unique time to be a part of the industry. But it shrunk a little bit, or at least hit kind of the peak of its popularity to this point. Sort of like NASCAR. If any of you are fans of sports here in the United States, NASCAR kind of hit critical mass a few years ago. It's been kind of slimming down a little bit. Still one of the most popular sports in the country, maybe the most popular besides the NFL. But it kind of hit critical mass and kind of slowed a little bit. Video games have hit that too. There hasn't been a crash like '82. There hasn't been a total just destruction of all video games out there and people just throwing them out the window because they don't want them anymore. It's just been kind of a little bit of a stagnation. People aren't buying at the clip that they used to buy. That being said, we're also hitting the tail end of the life cycles of the previous consoles. Hence why I would ask a question like this to begin with. So the Great Recession definitely has hit gamers' wallets. There's no question about that. And I think that makes a big impact on whether a new entrant would be welcomed in. If people don't have the money, several of you talked about money being a big, big issue. I, for one, don't feel good about the investment I made in the previous generation. So for me, I have a 360. I have a lot of games that I've played. There are a ton of games, a backlog of games, many of you said this as well, that you just haven't even gotten to yet. I can't justify that investment yet to really go, or even if I were going to buy something like a Kinect, which is a significant expense as an add-on, I can't even justify that kind of an expense, let alone the expense for a brand new piece of hardware. So, and if I were able to justify it, it would be through what kind of benefit it really played for me in my life. And honestly, right now, I'm not sure that I need it. And many of you said the same thing. You're not willing to justify with the Great Recession, let's say, or even not. You just can't justify the expense of having one of those consoles coming onto the market. You can't justify that expense. And I think that's a very fair point. Lucky mentioned something first that many of you talked about and something that I think is absolutely important, and that is that backwards compatibility is extremely important for any system that would come onto the market. Now, backwards compatibility could be seen in many different ways. Obviously, for the big three, backwards compatibility means compatibility for the last one, maybe even two, maybe even three systems. For example, if I were to see a PlayStation 4 right now, I think Sony probably will not have much in the realm of backwards compatibility. I don't think they would, because I think they learned their lesson with the PS3 having the eventually having no backwards compatibility, but having backwards compatibility originally as a feature that they decided to nix. It's also a precautionary tale. Think about the backlash that's gone against Sony because of the fact that they cut backwards compatibility. I think that's been a big hit. I know why it happened, because it's very difficult to implement in a very good way, other than doing what Sony did a long time ago, which was kind of embrace the emulation community through an emulation of either their own creation or of a licensed creation to be able to play games from the back catalog. So that's how a console backwards compatibility might look. And obviously at this point, I would love to see something that played not only Xbox 360 games, but also original Xbox games, of which I have many. But in any case, backwards compatibility looks like that for consoles. But for something like a Steam box, and this is where I think it really plays in,